Hello, this is Professor Nadia Netzel, and I'm actually recording my exam writing PowerPoint along with some helpful techniques. I'll be pausing between slides. The purpose of this recording is actually to give you an understanding of how to prepare for and how to write essay exams in law school. It is not tied to any particular topic. I might use some reference to beginning contracts, but that would be about it. The techniques I am giving can be adjusted pretty much to any professor who's giving any kind of essay exam in law school. Almost always professors want IRAC. They might call it something else. They might call it CRAC. They might use different words, but it comes down to issue, rule, analysis, conclusion. And with these directions, you can pretty much adjust your writing to any professor's specific demands. So here's your basic strategy. Always start with a course outline. And I can't emphasize this enough. Professors always say write an outline, but often students feel, oh, well, all I need to do to study is to read over and over again, or it's too much trouble to write my own. How would I know whether it's good or not? The learning is in the doing. The research shows that there are several techniques that really help you keep stuff in here, make it stick in there. One is spaced repetition. So instead of repeating something until you get it verbatim perfect, you space it apart. You repeat it one day, then maybe the next day, then 3 or 4 days, so that you go back to it. You also interleave it. So don't try to learn one subject at a time. Interweave them or interleave them, which is the technical term. I learned this when I was teaching ballroom dancing, that people who tried to learn 4 dances at once learned much better how to dance than people who just wanted to focus on tango or the waltz for their wedding. That you will learn much better the topic that you're working on if you make it a little hard and interleave. And the third, we call it reflection, but that's what teachers call it, but it's also called outlining. What you have to do is actively explain the topic to yourself in writing. And if you actually use one of these as opposed to your computer, that even more helps it stick. If you find you cannot explain a topic to yourself, then you obviously are not going to explain it on an exam. And so you need extra information. Okay, so let's say you've got your outline, you wrote it and you rewrote it and you rewrote it about 4 times, and each time it got shorter and shorter. So from maybe 60 pages to 30 pages to 15 pages to 2 pages the day before the exam. So now it's uploaded into this computer. So now you sit down, make sure you get sleep the night before. Can't do anything if this is offline, so get enough sleep. There is no cramming for law school. Like there's no crying in baseball, there's no cramming in law school. It just doesn't work. Okay, you're sitting down at the exam. Read the instructions. Read the instructions. Read the instructions. Allocate your time. Look at how many questions you have and their point value, and divide your time accordingly. I suggest you write down when you should be switching from one question to another. That is students' biggest problem once they assume they understand the material, is that they have trouble allocating their time. So they put all of the time into a low worth question, and then when it gets to a high point question, they're short. So obviously you want to put more time into the questions that can get you more points. So allocate your time right at the beginning and stick to that budget. Okay, then when you start a question, read that hypothet twice. Underline things or note them down. If you're doing this all in a computer format, note things down. And you're going to use a T-bar outline to help you organize your answer. I'll be explaining what that means. This reading twice, underlining, and outlining should take you about 1/3 of the allocated time for that question. Okay, don't do all of the T-bar outlining first for all the questions. Do one question at a time. I would start with the T-bar outline and the question that seems the easiest to you. that sort of gets this unfrozen. Because I don't know about you, but when I sit down at an exam, this has a tendency to do a little bit of a panic until it sort of gets warmed up. Once you've done your T-bar outline, then you write out your answer in paragraph form. And you'll add to it and change it as you sort of warm up to it. That will be helping you to think through it. The T-bar outline and then starting to write really helps this remember some of the things you thought you might have forgotten when you first sat down at the exam. Okay, this is an example of a T-bar outline. Now, I was the one who developed this technique. You can see it in my book, Legal Reasoning, Research and Writing for International Graduate Students. It's now in its 5th edition, published by Wolters Kluwer. If you Google me, it'll probably be one of the first things that come up. Legal Reasoning, Research and Writing, International Graduate Students. And you'll find this in the chapter on, the first chapter on writing, I think it's chapter 3. Okay, so with the T-bar outline, you start with the term, the legal issue. So let's say we have the legal issue is whether there was an offer, okay? So you put offer at the very top where it says T-bar outline. See, I've got this new tool here. So here you would put offer. And here you would start with terms from the definition. You don't have to write everything out. You just want to write keywords so that you know what you need to do next. So normally our brains don't think in logical progression. This helps you reorganize from your brain to the paper in a logical progression. So when you start with an issue, that issue statement in a hypothet always has a legal term. Begin by defining that legal term. Then you have to add everything in there that you know you need to talk about to explain it to the reader. So it might have element 1, element 2, you might have exceptions, you might have the effects of it. So all the things the reader will need to know in order to understand whether you thoroughly understand this concept. This is the first part of a hypothet. This is also you could call that a syllogism. This is the basic postulate, okay? This is the major premise, if you like. So the major premise has 5 parts or 4 parts, however many you need to explain to the reader and convince the reader that you know this topic, okay? Once you've done that, then opposite it, you tie in specific facts from the hypothet that address that portion of your rules section. So if you have element 1, well, what fact from the hypothet is speaking to element 1? You don't have to explain why here, just write down the fact. Okay, so I'm pretending that I'm going through this. Here I have definition. Okay, fact A. Okay, that's the thing that I think is they're asking me whether it's an offer or not. Okay, the next element is, let's say it's the element of whether it's addressed to a particular person. Okay, fact B, okay, I can tell this, the email was addressed to a particular person because Marcia sent it to John. She didn't send it to the entire class, she sent it to John. Okay, element 2, okay, I've got fact C there. I've got something. Uh-oh, exceptions. Now, I can't think right now. I know it's there somewhere, but it's not coming to me. So this may happen to you. You might find something that you can't apply, you can't analyze right now. Don't let it throw you. Just keep a place marker. No, you have to come back to that. Okay, fact D, I know I got that one. And so you note that down. Again, don't write sentences. This should take you no more than a couple of minutes to do, but it really helps you organize your answer. I can tell immediately on reading a student's hypothet, a student's exam answer, whether they've done this or not. If they haven't done this, I can usually guarantee they're not going to get anything better than a C, especially if you're a first-year law student. As you progress, when you write them out, you may combine the two. You may not have a separate rules section and a separate analysis section, but you do on your T-bar, and that helps keep you on the straight and narrow. Okay, we'll be going on to the next slide now. Okay, now we're getting into IRAC itself. We're starting to write. So how do you write a good issue statement? Well, to begin with, it's a statement. It's not a question. So the issue is whether Marcia made an offer. The issue is whether Marcia made an offer. That is not a question. It has whether in it, W-H-E-T-H-E-R. It's a statement. If you are writing a law office memo, it might be in question form, but it's not, so it properly takes a period. The next thing is some professors want you to write in CRAC. They want the issue to be the conclusion. Okay, so there was Marcia did make an offer. That's a conclusion. It's a legal conclusion. It's not an issue. That's another way of doing it. I personally didn't want to do that because I found as I was writing, especially sometimes when I missed analysis, like remember that T-bar, there was the blank space. Well, if I couldn't fully analyze that, I might change my mind. And if I change my mind and I don't go back and change my conclusion, I've contradicted myself and the professor is going to mark me down. So use issue or use conclusion, but make sure you have a few things in there. You want it tied to the question that was asked. So use some of the words in the question that was asked. So the issue is whether Professor Farrell's announcement was a valid offer, or Professor Farrell's announcement may be an offer capable of being accepted. Either one of those are fine. Why? Because they incorporate the call of the question, we call it the call of the question, language from the question asked, plus a couple of facts from the hypothet, plus the legal term that's at issue. So what is the legal term at issue here? Offer. What are a couple of the necessary facts? Well, Professor Farrell's announcement. Okay, so you have everything there. You have the call of the question, you have the legal term at issue, and you have a couple of facts from the hypothet. You don't have to state their facts from the hypothet. We can see that by the fact that you're using them. Okay, so issue should be fairly simple. We're going to move on now to rule. Okay, the rule section of your IRAC answer. For most professors, this is one of the two most important components of IRAC. The most important is analysis. You can't have good analysis, however, if you don't have thorough, careful, well-delineated rules, either on your T-bar or on your IRAC answer, okay? The rule should be stated objectively. This is where people who are beginning in law school have a lot of trouble. They say, oh, well, Professor Farrell should have. No, if it's an objective statement, that means you're not even going to talk about the facts of the hypothet. You're just going to talk about offers, okay? Because the issue here is whether Professor Farrell's statement was an offer. So you're going to explain what an offer is with all of those things from the left side of your T-bar. Okay, so you address it to, here's for example, as a good definition. You define an offer as a manifestation of willingness to enter into a contract so made as to justify another person in understanding that his acceptance is invited and will conclude it. That's restatement section 24. But here is the same thing broken out into elements. An offer must be addressed to a specific person. It must include the terms of the proposed bargain. And objectively viewed, the offerer must intend to be bound. So what does objectively viewed mean? Well, it means that the offeree reasonably thinks the offeror intends to be bound if the offeree just says yes, merely says yes. So you look at it from a reasonable person in the recipient's point of view. And what is it that he thinks the other person means? Not what that other person really means subjectively, but what an outsider reasonably thinks that other one means. Okay? So here I gave an example. Most advertisements are not offers because they're not addressed to a specific person. And a famous case involves fur pieces, but that wasn't offered because it was made to a specific group of 3 people. I'm not here to teach you contracts. We're just talking about what a rule would include. And in this case, I would include that last example specifically if there was some issue about to whom the offer was addressed. You're going to adjust the component of the rule to whatever is necessary in your analysis. Okay, so we will take a pause and then we'll go on to analysis itself. Okay, we're now talking about analysis. You've set out the issue, you've explained your rule, and now you're going to analyze how the rule applies to the facts, or apply the facts to the rules. Some professors use one term, some use the other. So first of all, you're going to want to use the same terms that you used in the rule. If you use the word offer in the rule, you'll use that in your analysis. This is not the time to think you have to come up with synonyms. You don't. The more you reuse the same terminology, the easier it is for the reader to follow you and understand what it is you're talking about. Then, again, going along the right side, my right, your left, the right side of your T-bar, you address each element of the rule. You start with the definition, and you explain why the definition applies, how it applies. You go through each element. Was it addressed to a particular person? It was, because it was addressed to John. Did it include enough terms so a court could enforce the resulting contract? Well, it didn't have a price, so therefore it did not. And finally, the third element, as we talked about, was objective intent to be bound. And, if Professor Farrell didn't include a price, then you couldn't really say he intended to be bound if somebody just said, yes, I want to buy the book. He's not bound because there's no price. We can't enforce it. And you wouldn't even think he intended. Very often people will just intend to negotiate. So this really helps. Usually what I found when I was taking law school exams is that when there was a blank, like there was in our T-bar earlier, by the time I wrote the issue and the rule and the other points of analysis, this thing had been working without my really focusing on it. And all of a sudden it was, okay, I got it now. I can get that third bit. With analysis, this word is because. You always want to include the word because. This was addressed to a particular person because. It had sufficient terms because. That word indicates causation. It tells the reader that here come the facts, here come the facts, here come the facts. What you're trying at this point, you earlier convinced the examiner that you understood the rules. Now you have to convince the examiner that you understand how they apply and that you are applying them thoroughly. Every single bit that you mentioned in the rule should now be mentioned and tied to a fact in your analysis. The word because, used often, helps you do that. Now, as you get more experienced, you may find more graceful ways of stating an issue. You may find more graceful ways of stating analysis. But fundamentally, with analysis, you always, always, always want to tie specific facts to each element of your rule. And that's where you're going to be getting the credit. Okay, so most of the time you're going to have because, and you're not going to come up with this. The not here is a conclusion. It's not analysis. The announcement was clearly not an offer. That's a conclusion. That is not tying specific facts to any part of the rule. Okay, so on now to the conclusion, which in many ways is the easiest part of the whole process. Okay, the conclusion, as I said, is pretty much straightforward. You just go back through the issue and you state yes or no if it's clear. If it was an ambiguous analysis, if you could go one way or the other, state that. State it's probably, and then you can explain what the weakness is if you have to. It's probably X, but could be Y if the court sees blank. Okay? You want to be exact here. You want to closely tie the rule to the facts and reach a sensible conclusion. Bring your sense of reality with you, your understanding of how real life works into the exam. So that your answer is sensible and it doesn't cause you to laugh. If you think about it and go, really? The law does that? That's really funky. Well, if that's sort of the impression you would get, then I think you've probably taken a wrong step somewhere. So go back and take a look at it and make sure that what you have concluded is sensible. Okay, here are some conclusions about things that students often have trouble with. Check with your professor about his or her grammar or spelling error policy. Usually we try not to be very strict on this, but if you misspell a term that was used a gazillion times in class, that doesn't look good. For example, in my sale and lease class, people would often write, the sell was not appropriate. Okay, to sell is the verb. A sale, S-A-L-E, is the noun. So if you didn't know when to use the noun and when to use the verb, I would deduct a couple of points from the 400-point exam. Okay. You also want to have your sentences have a reasonable context. You want to use words the way they're normally used. We don't say on the contingent. So contingently, it might be this. Okay. So you want to use phrases, and you get this by reading a lot. As you read, note how the judge who wrote the opinion used the phrase and practice using that on your outline. Okay. Hence the reason to write and rewrite your outline. I always gave 35% credit for a good rule and 35% credit for a good analysis. Now, if you didn't spot the issue in the first place, you lost the 15 points, the 15% for that. And if the answer was bonkers, then you'd lose the 15% for that. But usually, it's the rule and the analysis that are determinative of your grade. That and issue spotting. You get, now this is how I graded. Your professor might or might not do grade this way, but you could certainly ask them ahead of the exam if they give extra credit for anything. I never give credit, and I don't think any professor does, for merely repeating the facts. The professor wrote the facts. If you don't tie the facts to a rule, it's not analysis. You can't just say, this was addressed to a particular person. Professor Farrell said blah, 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 blah to John. That's not analysis. This was addressed to a particular person because Professor Farrell sent it to John. Okay, so the word because, again, shows that tight tie. Another thing that a lot of students forget to do or don't understand at first is it's IRAC. Write all your rules first. Use that whole left side of the T-bar. Don't mention the hypothet facts. Then write all of your analysis. Don't, I call it I-rah. Don't write one rule, then one analysis, then one rule, then one analysis. If you go back and read that, you will find a couple of things. First of all, it won't persuade anybody that you understand either the rule or the analysis because it's so broken up. And second of all, because it's so broken up, you're more than likely to make a mistake in your analysis. So all the rules, or rather all the rules, and then all the analysis, okay? So no I-rah, or no IRAC. IRAC. All the rules, all the analysis and conclusion for each issue that the call of the question asks you to address. And that's pretty much the T-bar method. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to either email me or ask me on Twin. Thank you. Good luck on your exams. Bye.